Well, good morning and namaste. It's always an honor and a privilege to share with you on these days when I can be of service to you. So I suspect that the title of my sermon got some attention. The problem with things like this is these titles come to me and then I have to write something around it. I go, something will come, oh, that sounds interesting. I hope it's true. And we'll see what happens. And then I do a little scribbling and a little research, and sometimes it's, yeah, okay, this fits, and other times, I don't know what I was thinking. But the title about giving up as a virtue actually does have a little bit of history. It isn't something that just sounded like an attention grabber. In the Hindu tradition, we always strive for balance. In the same way that when we're watching the breath, we feel the coolness, we feel the warmth, we feel the coolness, we feel the warmth. This is similarly expressed in the book of Ecclesiastes. I remember that the single Turn, Turn, Turn by the Byrds, the first 45 I ever bought with my own money. And looking back, because I was actually thinking of this over the last week, it makes so much sense that would be the first single I would buy with my own money. Because adapting a spiritual practice that always focused on balance, a time for this, a time for that, always making sure that we don't go too far in one direction, too far in another. It makes sense. And so the idea of striving for balance and knowing when to put forth indomitable will at one point and to withdraw that will at another, again, makes sense. The wisdom that we must develop internally is knowing when, because giving up can be the exact opposite of virtue. It can be, if I can use such a word in a place like this, a sin. Excuse me. It's interesting because I have a dear friend. He's actually a Unity minister right now in another state. And one time he gave me they were like flashcards. They were cards with pithy sayings from our scripture, the Bhagavad Gita, because he has studied Hinduism a great deal. Well, not a great deal, but let's say somewhat. So he got these cards with all of these sayings from the Bhagavad Gita, which, if you've heard me before, you know that I often draw from the wisdom of that particular scripture. And he gave them to me because he got them, whether they were a gift or whether he bought them, but he didn't like them because they used the word sin. And he's it offended him. But we do use the word sin. Actually, the word for sin in Sanskrit that we use is pap. Sounds more fun, doesn't it? Pap. Oh, you did a pap. I guess I did. And I think the reason is because in the traditional Western religion in which he was raised, sin isn't just a bad thing that you do, it's your nature. All right? And that is the challenge that certainly many of you are here today because you rejected that idea of sin being your nature. Reminds me I may have mentioned this here before. Those of you who come out of the Reformed tradition would know this. For, people who are not part of the Calvinist Reformed tradition would not necessarily, but Calvinists have an acronym, TULIP. How many people here know TULIP? Anybody know TULIP, the acronym? Okay, I'll educate you here. So the main points of Calvinism begin T for TULIP, okay, which means total depravity, which means our nature is totally depraved. I forget what the U is right now. The L is limited atonement, meaning that Jesus died for a few people, not for everybody. The I is irresistible grace, meaning if God has his eye on you, you can't resist. And P is perseverance of the saints. The saints keeps on working. Okay, so that's the backstory. I was at a conference on Hinduism in Kalamazoo College. And it was an academic conference, so we had people from various schools and colleges, and there was somebody from Calvin there. And in the midst of discussion, she was sharing that she had an issue with the fact that Hatha yoga, was being practiced at Calvin, and that, she was afraid that some people might delve into Hinduism because they're doing backbends. And that people were saying namaste. The students were saying namaste to one another. And I think most, if not all of you know, namaste means the divinity within me bows to the divinity within you. And that is not classical Calvinism. So she was concerned about this. So I had a suggestion. I said, see if you can get the students to say Namashura. Namashura, because they probably will pick it up because, it's Sanskrit, it's cool, it's Indian, it sounds yogic, and it sounds close to namaste. I said, but namashura would be a little bit closer to, I think, what you could accept. She says, what does it mean? I said, the total depravity in me bows to the total depravity in you. I don't know if they adopted that. But Calvin College does have an adult education, a continuing education for mainly retirees, and lo and behold, I'm teaching a class on Hinduism there. So I'll see how many I can bag. No. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. I kind of got off track. I'm sorry. The idea of sometimes giving up can be the wrong move. Oftentimes it is, but sometimes it is not. In our reading today from the Daily Word, it says it so succinctly. Knowing that all things are working together for the good, I move with things just as they are and cooperate with the opportunities as they unfold. The idea of surrendering to a process, to a wisdom that is higher than our own at this particular time can be a good thing. In the Hindu Dharma, we have many different forms of yoga. I just mentioned Hatha yoga, which is the physical postures that prepare us for meditation. But there's also karma yoga. Karma yoga is the yoga of selfless action. It is acting without the thought of the fruits of action, right? So when we act, let's say, for instance, we're at an intersection and we see someone who is somehow handicapped and they're attempting to move across the street and they're having trouble. When we reach out and say, do you need some help? Yes, please. Yes, could you take my arm? Nobody is thinking about any sort of reward. All you're thinking about is the help that you are giving that person. The only fruit, if you will, of that action is that you make it across the street. all right? And even then, even to have that hope, it really doesn't matter. The fact that you are helping this other person is utmost in your mind. There are a lot of things we do that are not pure karma yoga. So for instance, when we give to charity, we give from our heart, and we hope that this will be used for the good, the betterment of humanity or a community. We're also knowing that, there's a tax write-off in there too, isn't there? And that's okay. I'm not telling you not to take the tax write-off. I do. But I'm simply saying it's not pure karma yoga. The purest is when there is absolutely no thought. To be like the ant who, after some idiot kid comes and just decides to, there's an anthill, let's get rid of that anthill. What does the ant do? The ant doesn't bother the ant a bit. Just let's start building another one. So whatever energy you expend for a project, you shouldn't worry about whether the project is complete. Of course, we do on a human level, but ultimately, we know that it is our energy, it is our good thoughts, it is our blood, sweat, and tears that go into something, and that is good unto itself. But when do you say, no, I can't do this? And not only just in projects such as that, but what about in relationships? What about in those circumstances where our livelihood may be a factor? When we decide that we're going to invest this amount of time, this amount of money in something that is, we hope, professionally appropriate for us. When we put the time and the energy and the love into a relationship, and it's very hard not to expect something from another person when we're in relationship with that person. Some tangential relationships, it's true. I have relationships with friends, and I completely accept them for who they are. And I may know, this person isn't going to spend a lot of time trying to take care of my needs, but I kind of like having this person in my life for one reason or another. Sometimes it's just purely because they've been in my life since I was a kid, and I love having that touchstone with my past. So I will put up with the fact that they're not going to give as much to the relationship as I am. But I can't have that relationship with my wife. It's too unrealistic. I need a wife that is going to contribute to this thing called our relationship, right? So when do we expend the energy that is necessary, and when do we withdraw, saying the energy is misspent? I can spend my time doing better things. I can spend my time in a more healthy way by just giving up. But here's what makes it a virtue as opposed to a fault. Here's what makes it appropriate versus inappropriate. The idea of passivity is something we need to consider. There's passive giving up. There's, whatever. That's not good. When we shrug our shoulders and just say, it's too hard. When we dismiss it, when we just forget about something, that is not the way to move forward. To move forward in giving up something that is detrimental to our lives. For instance, investing too much in some professional endeavor that is draining us of our finances, draining us of our will, draining us of our time with our family, and emotionally just slapping us around. That's not passive giving up. That's taking into account that common sense and hopefully to rise above common sense to divine wisdom. This is not the path for me. I am seeing this path in front, and I'm seeing the obstacles, and I realize these obstacles are being placed in my path for a reason that I need to redirect. When we're in relationship with someone and we realize that due to a variety of circumstances, nothing is going to change, we will not find the joy that we need to have, nor are we going to be able to give any joy to that other person. When we make it a part of our spiritual practice to give up, when we bring God into whatever it is we're doing, and if we bring God into giving up, if we're really sincere and we do the hard work that is a part of giving up, that should be a part of giving up, then it becomes a virtue. Then we're able to say, in retrospect, and I've done my share of giving up. And sometimes it's been a virtue, sometimes it hasn't. But when it has been a virtue, when it is something that I've been able to say, I am releasing this, and I am accepting reality as it is, and I am open for a new direction. When I've done all of that, asked for direction, worked for direction, then things have worked out, and I felt that it is a virtue. I felt that personal growth that is so important. It's so important to recognize when it's happening or when it has happened. To be able to look back and say, wow, just think, a year ago, I would have just reacted this way to it, and now I'm reacting this other way to it. And I kind of like me this way as opposed to back then. The key, I believe, let me say a couple other things first. When the opportunity is put in front of us to possibly give up, to surrender, to make that change in direction, there's usually a tremendous emotional cost. No matter how noble or ignoble, there is still, we are attached to that project, we are attached to that person, we're attached to that mindset, we're attached to that form of religion, whatever it is. Very few people are able to say, oh, I'm done with that. Of course not. There is a lot of work to do just giving up that's very similar to mourning, right? If you have a professional endeavor, if you have a relationship, you don't just walk away hands-free and say, I'm on to the next thing. Very few people are able to do that. How you are able to survive and thrive, how you are able to move on emotionally, I can't tell you what to do, and I would be very suspicious of anyone who came to you and said, here's my formula. We're all different emotionally and spiritually. We all react to different things. And part of that work is discovering what is appropriate for you and what is appropriate for this other person. So I don't believe in quick formulas. I don't believe that things are going to be just fine overnight. What I can tell you, in my experience, and in the experience of others with whom I have had interaction when talking about this subject, is that something must take place in our consciousness on a daily basis to move ourselves from one point to another. Some sort of spiritual practice. I think you've heard me say this a few times, whether it's meditation or affirmation or scriptural study, or to use a phrase from my tradition, satsang, a gathering of truth seekers. So any sort of support system. Any one or all of those things, and there are things that I haven't even thought of, because that's on you to discover what works and what doesn't. When you find that, when you find those tools to help you move on, then you do move on. And you move on, here's the important thing, you move on not just intellectually. It's so easy to say, I've moved on. And in the beginning, when we affirm that, we affirm, I'm moving on, I am accepting this, I am releasing that. We say that, and intellectually it sounds good to hear, but emotionally it's not there for a while. And that's something we can't give up on. Once we've decided to give up, once we've decided to surrender, we cannot give up on those techniques which will really help us to move forward. Because if we give up on those, then we're right back where we started, at least emotionally. We may really have given up on this, that, and the other thing, but if they're still in our consciousness, what's the point? So, I'm simply going to leave you with the challenge of discovering what works for you when you are challenged with the possibility that you have to give up in a relationship, in a profession, in your spiritual life, in any endeavor in life. But move forward not with the sense of failure. And let me mention one other thing that is important. When you are in these situations, acknowledge your responsibility for being where you are, and try to place the blame, yes, I said blame, squarely where it often deserves to be, which is right with us. Something about this no-fault society kind of frustrates me. And when I hear, there's some sort of bad situation, and right away there's always somebody who's going to say, now, it's nobody's fault. There probably is somebody in the mix there that, yeah, it's their fault, and oftentimes it's mine. Acknowledge our responsibility and remember that we are where we are. We have the people in our lives who are in there. We have our professional endeavors. We have all of this because each and every one of us has worked towards this situation. That's karma. And karma isn't some sort of invisible force that directs things here or there. It's not ironclad destiny from a God on high or anywhere else. Karma is simply the reactions to our actions. And once we know that, once we can embrace that, then healing can start. But it has to be, one has to be able to say, I got myself into this. Nobody else did. And so it goes. And then the real work begins. So, if we can, let me close. Let's just have one more moment of silence. And I will simply share some thoughts to contemplate. I acknowledge that all that I am up to this point is self-created. I acknowledge that not every decision that I have made has come from divine wisdom, but often from the ego, often from misdirection. But I acknowledge that I have the innate power to move forward, to let go, to surrender, to give up, to reach my highest good. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. That is peace, peace, peace. Thank you very much.